Hello people, welcome back to yet another video. It's been a while. Let's talk about Arsenal. Today I wanted to talk about something very interesting, and this is the current structure of Arsenal Football Club. Who makes the decisions, who makes the financial decisions, who makes the trading decisions, etc, etc, right? Now the reason I want to talk about this is because lately I've seen a lot of criticism of Arteta making the wrong moves. We've seen a lot of criticism about Edu making the wrong moves, Kroenke as well, right? And yeah, so let's kick with it. Now, a couple of years ago, as you know, they announced this big project rebuild, as they called it, right? When they decided to change the things at the club. A couple of years before that, they tried to work with the guys like Sven Middelstadt, right? A lot of scouts, it didn't work out. Kroenkes were not ready to spend big on this, so the scouts were kind of hand-banded there. After that, they decided to get rid of the scouts. They went to work with agents directly. Again, didn't work out. For some reason, they decided to listen to the agents, not to their own manager, who was Unai Emery, for example. We all know that he wanted Zaha. They got Pepe because the structure was better for the club. Didn't work as well, and then they announced this big rebuild. They went and hired Edu. They presented him as this director of football. After that, they tried different managers, and obviously this went with Mikel Arteta at the end. Now, they presented to us this typical European football structure, right? You have director of football and you have the manager of the club, which is Arteta, who makes all the calls. Now, I've I've been watching US sports for more than 20 years now. I'm a huge fan. I love the NHL, the Hockey League. I love NBA. I watch NFL. I watch MLB as well. And the reason I'm giving the US sports, for example, is because obviously Arsenal has American owners, and those guys, they own the Colorado Avalanche in the NHL, they own the Denver Nuggets in the NBA, Rams obviously in NFL, and uh, the Rockies in MLB. And if you dig into the American structure, the way the sports in general works in America is you have the owner, right? Now the owner decides what he wants to achieve with his club. He basically decides what kind of resources he's ready to spend on that, and he hires a general manager, right? Basically, a guy who will try to achieve this with the resources he has. Basically, this is the guy like the CEO, right? He's the guy who will make all the calls. After that, this guy, the general manager, he goes and he looks for a coach that will be on the same page as him, and he hires the coach. Now, the general manager is the guy who is doing basically everything. He makes all the calls. He's the guy who decides which player to trade for. He's the guy who most of the times decides which player they want to draft in the drafts. Right? He's the guy who decides which players will be dropped, which players will be promoted from the affiliated teams, etc., etc. Now, of course, the coach has sayings here as well. He's one of the guys to share his opinion. He could go to the general manager and say, look, we need to strengthen on this position, either because of injuries or just we're not good enough, etc., etc., right? But in general, it's the general manager. Even if you look at the awards they give after each season, you have a best general manager award, and they also have best coach award, right? Two separate awards. Now, the coach is the guy who basically chooses the tactics. The coach is the guy who chooses who will start the game, right? He to pick up the starting lineup. He's the guy who chooses who will be on the bench on that particular day, and obviously he's the guy who sits on the bench and makes the calls during the game. Now, one of the teams you could look at is the Colorado Avalanche from the National Hockey League, and the reason I will talk about the Avalanche is that I think that their structure is very similar, right? The path they went is very similar. 2015 they were one of the worst teams in the league. 2016 they were the worst teams in the league. Deadly last. So the Kroenkes, what they did, sorry, not well, yeah, the Kroenkes, what they did is basically they decided to go a different way, and they hired a guy whose name is Joe Sakic, who is currently the general manager of the Avs. They hired him as such. He's a legend of the game, not just of the club. He's a legend of the game, one of the best players. If you watch ice hockey, you know what I'm talking about. And basically, he took over the club, and he made some strange decisions. Well, back then they were strange. Now everybody sees why he made what he made, all those decisions. And for example, he traded one of the guys named Matt Duchene, right? Back in the days, the best player of the Avalanche by a mile. Everybody was laughing. A lot of people were laughing. Not everybody, but a lot of people were laughing at him. They couldn't understand this trade, but it ended up being a genius move because he actually got a lot for that trade. He got a lot of draft picks. Now you know that, or if you don't know, you will learn about this, that in the States, in the United States, what they call the four major leagues like NBA, NHL, NFL, MLB, they don't do the transfers like the European football clubs do, right? They don't go and spend 40, 50 millions on one player just to buy him. What they basically do is they trade player for a player or two players for one player, plus they add draft picks. So for example, if you want to get a very good player, it will cost you a couple of your guys and probably a couple of draft picks in upcoming drafts. You know that in the States, again, in those four major leagues, you don't have relegation. So basically, you can finish deadly last and just grab a higher draft pick in the draft, basically. Now, in case with NHL, you don't necessarily get first pick. If you're deadly last, you get a higher chance to get first pick because they have this thing called lottery. Now, in NFL, for example, you finish deadly last, you get the first pick, right? So, yeah. So this is very important, right? And if you look at this, this is very similar to what happened at Arsenal, right? They hired Edu basically hired a coach that he could work with, which was basically Mikel Arteta. And I believe that all the calls that were made are made by by Edu, right? So he's the guy who decides which player he wants to get, and then he talks to Arteta to see what positions they need to strengthen, etc., etc. Right? So I do believe that this is the structure that we currently have at the club, right? So let me know what you think about this. Do you think that there is a ground here? Do you think that it's complete nonsense? And yeah, let's see what are your thoughts here, and catch you up in the next video. Up to the next one.